This is chapter 14, Argumentation. So the quote for this chapter is, "Nothing is as frustrating as arguing with someone who knows what he's talking about," by Sam Ewing. So according to the quote above, what can lead to frustration? So think about it. When you're arguing with someone who knows what he or she is talking about, what can be frustrating about that? Now on the converse, what could be frustrating about arguing with someone who does not know what they're talking about? Now let's go back to the first one. Arguing with someone who knows what they're talking about. Do you disagree with this author's perspective? He believes that arguing with someone who knows what they're talking about is a source of frustration. Do you agree with him or disagree with him? So take a minute and think about what the quote means and then decide whether you agree or disagree. And then think about, nothing is as frustrating as arguing with someone who does not know what he or she is talking about. Do you agree or disagree with that? So take a moment, think about that, write it down, and we'll be prepared to discuss it. So going on with an argument, ask yourself, when you think of the word argument or argumentation, what does this mean? So consult any sources you want to. You can use your book and write down a couple of things. What does argumentation mean? So some of the definitions of an argument are a quarrel or dispute. So you can think about maybe between brothers, brother and sister, neighbors, those are quarrels or disputes. Another definition could be a discussion or course of reasoning aimed at demonstrating truth or falsehood of something. So that also is an argument when you're trying to determine the truth or the falsehood of something. The chapter is going to focus on reasonable arguments. This is well-crafted argumentative essays, and they also will explain something. Well-crafted arguments, they also prompt reason rather than emotion, and they guide the reader towards logical, informed conclusions. So it's not enough to just set up an argument. The purpose is to guide the reader towards a logical, informed conclusion. So that's an argument. Keep that in mind. So the learning outcomes within this chapter, the first one you have understanding argumentation. So understanding exactly what an argument is, and this is important. There's a difference between argumentation and persuasion, and I will discuss that later. Learning outcome 2 is learning about reading strategies. So ask yourself, what are some reading strategies? We talked about the reading process in chapter 2, as well as KWL and SQ3R. Those are some reading strategies, so ask yourself that. Learning outcome 3 is reading and reacting to a professional essay. This is something that we will do in class. Learning outcome 4 is reading and responding to a student essay. We will also discuss that, as well as some issues that can be argued. Learning outcome 5 is planning your argumentative essay. Although you may already know what side you choose to take in an argument, you still have to plan the essay. So the further we get, this will make a little more sense. 6 is writing the first draft. Just with every other form of writing, there needs to be multiple drafts in order to get to a final draft. 7, revising the essay. So what are some things you can do in order to revise an essay? Think about some of those things. And then the last one is editing the writing. So what you should do in order to edit and then finally publish your writing. So learning outcome 1, understanding argumentation. So the basic structure of argumentation can be traced back to ancient civilization and is still used today. There are many strategies for argumentation, debate, all of those things. One of them is the Toolman strategy, which looks at lines of reasoning and then goes from there. So that's a very old method, and it still kind of follows it today, although there are different strategies. A strong argument is going to present a logical or reasonable claim, which is going to be your thesis, and it is based on solid evidence. So what is evidence? Think about if you were to write a paper, what is evidence? What are some things that can be considered evidence? So think about that. Be sure to have that. A strong argument is going to recognize important opposing points of view, and is either going to concede or counter them. This is very important. Argumentation is going to acknowledge that there is another side, and it will either concede or counter them. Concede means to say, okay, you're right. Counter means to argue and say, okay, this is what you say, but this is why this is incorrect. For the purpose of your paper, you will not be conceding. You are going to counter. So remember that. So the next most important thing, make sure you focus on this because this is very important. There is a difference between argumentation and persuasion. Now, if you think back to the strap strategy and purpose, The purpose has meaning to this. So to inform, to explain, to entertain, to persuade. So yes, the purpose, you are going to persuade. However, it's more than that. A thorough logical argument is going to be persuasive. This is true. But that is not the main purpose. So yes, you will be persuading, but it is not the main purpose. The real intent of argumentation is to prove the strength and validity of a certain line of thinking. So basically the point is to show that your line of thinking or your position is what is correct. You will show both sides. That is an argument. You will show both sides, but you're going to prove why your line of thinking is what is correct. Learning outcome 2, learning about reading strategies for argumentation. Strategy 1, you want to make sure that you identify the main parts. The main claim or the thesis, as stated earlier, it generally is going to appear early on in the essay. It's usually going to be in one of the opening paragraphs within your introduction and after any background information. So you might ask yourself, do I need background information? Chances are, if you are trying to get people to understand your line of thinking, you're going to need background information. Another example is if you were talking about something not everyone is familiar with. So if your topic is all genetically modified food should be outlawed. Everyone does not understand what genetically modified food is. So you would need to define what that is, maybe give a little history on it or background information on genetically modified food, so that way people can understand where you're going before you've even started. So sometimes when you have certain terms, it's best to define them. If you are going to talk about maybe a social trend such as the death penalty, if you were going to discuss the death penalty, have we always had the death penalty? Was it good? Was it bad? What was the country's history when we did not have it, when it was abolished? Has that changed? Is it still the same? That's background information that you would want to include before you even start discussing whether you were for, against, and then tackling the other side. Another thing that you need to be aware of is that your thesis statement is going to make a stand or present a viewpoint about the topic. We will work on this in class, but you want to make sure that within your thesis statement, if people don't read any more of your paper, they read this one sentence and they can understand what your topic will be and your stance on that topic. So that's a strong thesis statement. So you want to make sure that that's addressed within your thesis statement. Another thing that you want to have, as mentioned earlier, is evidence. A claim stands or falls flat on its supporting evidence. The evidence in a strong argument, it can be checked, backed up, and is relied upon by facts, statistics, examples, and expert testimonies. So details. Details are going to help your thesis either stand or fall flat. So it's not enough to say the death penalty is not helping our society. Should we believe that because you said so? No, you need to provide statistics. So, and I'm completely making this up, if there was a statistic that said in Texas, crime has gone down since the death penalty has been used, then that's evidence, because it's not enough for me to say, oh, the death penalty is great. These numbers also say that the death penalty works. Now, if you were to say the death penalty has gone up in New Mexico and crime has increased as well, then that is not supporting the fact that the death penalty is a good thing in New Mexico. So you want to make sure that your evidence is going to support your stance. And another thing is that you want to make sure that you have evidence as well for the opposition. The opposition also needs to have evidence. Again, your evidence is going to have your claim stand or fall flat, and evidence is needed on both sides because it is an argument. You would never go into an argument with someone and say, the sky is blue today, and that person says, it is. That's not an argument. So you want to make sure you have both sides as well as facts to back up both sides. So continuing learning outcome 2, a counter argument. Now this is what you have to have within argumentation. A counter argument is going to be where a strong argument addresses opposing points of view and either concedes or counters them. Again, for the purpose of this paper, you are going to counter them. Words or phrases that let you know that, or these are transition words that let you know that this is a counter, is granted that, it is true that, I accept that, no doubt, admittedly, so on. So those are examples. So let's go back to the example of the sky is blue. If someone was to say the sky is blue, then your counter could be with that. Granted that the sky is blue, today we are in Lubbock, Texas, the sky is brown. That would be a counter argument. Now, granted, you need to be talking about something that's a little more complex than the color of the sky, but that would be a counter argument, agreeing with the facts that the opposition has brought up, but saying this is not the case. So I agree with what you're saying, but this is why you're wrong. That is the purpose of a counter argument. The next thing is you want to make sure that you understand the voice, and this refers to the author's writing personality and attitude toward the topic and the reader. So there's some questions that you want to ask yourself. So you want to ask yourself, does the author seem honest and sincere? So when you are looking for evidence or support to back up your claim, does this person seem honest and fair? Or is it somebody who they just have an opinion on something, they're upset, and this is what they're saying? So when you think about this, you can think about let's say if you were talking about texting and driving and you wanted to tackle that issue as far as argumentation, and you went to a website which someone might have had a child die from someone who was texting and driving. Now that person might be a little emotional and they might not provide a lot of statistics. Now they could be fueling their argument or their claim off of their opinion because this is something that's hit close to home. Not saying that it wouldn't work or it couldn't work, but those are things that you want to be cognizant about. The next thing is, does he or she make a realistic claim? So if someone said that they believe that everyone should have a unicorn, that's not a realistic claim. So that's probably not something you want to use as evidence because not one person is going to get a unicorn. So that's not a realistic claim. Does he or she focus on issues rather than personalities? Now this is another issue that a lot of people will run into, depending on your topic. So some students have decided to look at whether the Affordable Health Care Act or Obamacare is something that the United States should have. A lot of people do not look at the actual ins and outs of the act, but more so they look at the person who has enacted the act. So they might not like the person and therefore they don't like the act. So you want to make sure that those are things that you look at, actual facts as opposed to personalities. Another thing is the author engage rather than lecture the reader. So if someone is just lecturing as opposed to engaging, that's also a red flag that this might not be the best type of support. Learning outcome 3, reading and reacting to professional essay. This is something that we will do in class. Learning outcome 4 is reading and reacting to a student essay. Again, that's going to be something in which we will work on in class. Learning outcome 5, planning your argumentative essay. The first thing, of course, if you think back to the traits, is ideas. So you want to have a topic, you want to have an idea. When you're selecting a topic, if you can't think about something, you can browse through a newspaper, look on the internet, magazines, look for current issues that people have and strong feelings about that. So don't just choose something that there's really no genuine opinion about it. Choose a topic in which there are differing sides. For one, it's going to be easier to argue, and two, it's going to be a little more interesting for you as well as your reader. So these are things that you want to consider. Think of social trends, social phenomena. We will talk about some examples of this in class and utilize some examples in class. Consider taking a position. Once you decide on the topic, consider what your initial position is or your opinion on the issue. And you might find the more that you research this and find details that maybe your opinion is not exactly what it was before you knew. So you want to make sure that you find information on your topic to see if whether they fit into your opinion or if they've changed your opinion. If you need to, after you do more research, you can refine your opinion. So you want to make sure to use the following strategies to develop and refine your opinion. Research different positions on your topic. So again, this is not just persuasion, it's argumentation. You want to make sure that you research different opinions on your topic. So of course, if you think, oh, the death penalty is great, we need to keep that in every single state, then that's your opinion. There is another side to this. There are people who think that the death penalty is unconstitutional. So you want to make sure you research both sides. And you could be doing some reading into this and figure, you know what, I no longer think we need it. I think that we don't. And now you've refined your position. So make sure you do research on both sides of the issue. The next thing, determine if the most compelling evidence supports or opposes your initial position. Again, if you find that as a whole, the death penalty serves no purpose for every single state, again, this is a made-up statistic. If you find that the death penalty does not serve as a positive deterrent, then that might help you refine your position, and maybe now you are against the death penalty. So again, your research should help you either solidify your opinion or change your opinion. If nothing else, clarify what it is that your position is. The fifth one, planning your essay. Again, you want to make sure that you gather details to support your stand or position on an issue. You must gather convincing support to defend it. Facts, statistics, testimonials, and predictions, those are different kinds of details that help you strengthen your thesis statement, strengthen your topic sentences. Arrange your details, and you can order these by importance. That's how most argumentative essays work. That's why a pattern of organization, or another word for argumentation, is order of importance. So arrange your details from either most important to least important, or from least to most. It depends on the point that you're trying to make. But remember, you do need details for both sides. Now, when you're writing the first draft, you want to make sure that you create opening paragraphs. They should capture the reader's interest. So you can do this with an interesting lead-in. Maybe provide a statistic, you can provide a story, however you want to do it, but have something interesting to grab the reader before they start reading your paper and they're bored before they've even begun. So have something interesting to grab your reader's attention. You want to make sure you provide background information. Again, if something you are discussing is not something everyone's familiar with, or if you just need background information to set your argument in context, make sure you provide that. There aren't very many topics that don't need background information, so make sure you have that. State your position on the topic. Again, this should be within your thesis statement. If you write 4 to 5 pages and someone doesn't read anything else, this one sentence should let your reader know, this is my topic, there is another side, and this is my stance on it. This is what your thesis statement should aim to show. You can have a brief dramatic story, again, within your introduction. You can offer a surprising statistic, that's another thing, or you can make a personal confession. Personal confessions aren't always the best, but sometimes they are good for argumentation. The next part is going to be the middle parts of your essay. The middle paragraphs, they should support your claim or your thesis with the details that you've gathered. So you want to make sure that you present your support in the best order for your argument. You want to provide enough information to make each point clear. So don't present something and not have information to make it clear. And address any opposing points of view. That's also going to be a part that's in your middle paragraphs. And then finally, your closing paragraph, it should restate or reaffirm your position. So basically, you need to restate your thesis statement, you need to tell us exactly why anybody should care, and then probably offer insight. So again, you've told us all of this to tell us what. So that's one thing that I will always say. You say this to say what. It's not enough to just say it all. Why should anybody care, and why are you telling us this? So if you're talking about sexual education in high school, why should anybody care about this? Why should I care about this? So these are things that you need to explain within your closing paragraph. Well, you should explain it throughout your whole paper, but you want to reiterate it in your closing paragraph to let your reader know, I've told you all of this stuff and this is why it's important to you. Learning outcome 7 is looking out for logical fallacies. A logical fallacy is what? So you need to be able to define what a logical fallacy is. The purpose of a logical fallacy, or the problem with a logical fallacy, is that it weakens an argument by doing certain things. So be prepared to discuss what a logical fallacy is. There are different kinds of logical fallacies, and we'll discuss those in class. Learning outcome 8, editing the writing. So after you've done the revising parts, then you want to make sure that you edit it, because it makes no sense to have a revision but change nothing. So also as a note for your papers, if you have comments and corrections within your paper, make sure that you make those changes if you think it's necessary, but make sure you make those changes before you resubmit or publish your paper. So that's the editing part. So you want to correct any ambiguous wording. Ambiguous wording, they make uncertain situations for the reader where you can't really understand what the writer is trying to tell you. Such wording results in sentences that have multiple meanings, and avoid indefinite pronoun references, incomplete comparisons, and unclear wording. So again, you don't want to try and compare two things in order to show why one thing is not the best, but your comparison is incomplete, because that makes it confusing for your reader. And then you also don't want to have unclear wording. So grammar, make sure that your grammar is correct, and also make sure that you're using the correct voice, which would be academic voice. Make sure you're using academic voice so that way your reader is able to better understand what it is you're trying to say and understand your lines of argument. Now within an informative paper, you might be able to get away with some incomplete thoughts and unclear wording. However, with an argument, since you are trying to prove a point and prove the validity of something, if you have wording that's unclear, it makes it hard for your reader to understand what it is that you were trying to say to them because it's unclear. So that's argumentation. Again, we will discuss this in class. We will do multiple examples. So be prepared with topics and ideas as well as thesis statements for your topics and for argumentation.